Welcome to What Resonates. This podcast is about tuning into energy, intuition, and what feels true for you. Each conversation invites you to notice what sparks curiosity and feels aligned, opening a wider field of possibility for yourself and for humanity. Keep tuning in and follow What Resonates. Do you feel a call to open more fully to your inner guidance and live in alignment with your highest wisdom? I have a course and it's called Channel Your Divine Self. It's 6 weeks. We're meeting live starting January of 2026, and I'm leading the class along with the emissaries of light. And together, we're going to help you release doubt, anchor trust, and build a safe, sovereign connection with your divine self. Every session is recorded, and you'll receive lifetime access so you can return to the teachings over and over. If you're ready to channel with clarity, visit mainstreamreiki.com and join us. Welcome to What Resonates, the podcast where we invite you to tune into yourself as you tune into our conversations, in which we explore topics like spirituality, consciousness, intuition, energy, and healing. I'm Andrea Kennedy, and I have with me today Keith Parker. He's a teacher, author, and energy healing practitioner known for co-founding Field Dynamics, a contemporary modality devoted to the human energy field and mind-body transformation. After years of intensive practice, he gained the ability to clearly perceive the aura, leading him to shape a grounded, science-friendly approach to energy work. He went on to write a book called Radical Reality: How Seeing the Aura Reveals Who and What We Are. Welcome to the show, Keith. It's a joy to have you here, and I can't wait to dive in and learn about this whole modality and how it came to be.
Thanks, Andrea. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. I think I'd love to start because I'm curious about what does all that mean from the intro about your intensive practice and, that led to seeing the aura and that kind of thing. Can you get into a little bit of that about your background?
Sure. So like many people, I started to get involved with inner work and meditation, particularly because I was stressed out, experiencing, discontent and not really sure where I was headed in life. And this was in my mid-late 20s. And I started to meditate every day. Basically, I followed Buddhist and yogic traditions and got really committed, pretty much gave up the life that was familiar to me and became a kind of renunciate within an urban modern context. Went to India a whole lot, did the cliche stuff. And I maintained a really intensive practice for about 5 years initially, where you could say I was meditating 6 to 8 hours a day in one form or another in a formal sense. And those hours build up, and we have like a 10,000 hour rule that we've heard about, the idea of like mastering something. And certain things just started to happen naturally as the years progressed. I noticed my perception of myself and all kinds of things were shifting naturally. And that led to some more extreme transformative events, kind of classically documented in different enlightenment and awakening traditions, particularly Kundalini traditions. And at a certain point, kind of overnight, this particular experience in which this kind of explosive opening took place. And all of a sudden I could see all these colors swirling around my body, and I could perceive and feel all these little cones of energy and light kind of sucking energy in and out of my midline, and all my arms and legs and organs had little channels of energy flowing through them, and I could feel and see that myself, and I could see that in other people as well. And I was quite changed by that particular experience, even though there are many steps to it. That was a demarcation of sorts. And then I spent many years trying to make sense of that and to refine what openings came as a result of that experience. And it led me down the path of going from enlightenment and awakening inquiry to healing work, and what eventually led to kind of a specialization and real big curiosity about subtle energy, because that's where my perception is really landed and grounded.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, this was meditation based. Did you learn modalities? Were you practicing that? Was it plant medicine? It seems very vibrant and pretty transformational, if it was just meditation.
I've always been a bit of curious about different approaches. So I was studying everything I could get my hands on. The foundation of it was meditation. And for many years, it was meditation and yoga, just asana, breath work, traditional meditation, concentration meditation. And it built from there. But there was years of just that. And then I started to look into different, you could say, healing modalities. And in the lead up to the event that I described, I did work a lot with craniosacral work, particularly biodynamic training, and lots of different healing modalities. And so I document all of this in the book that you mentioned, and I did so and published that book this year because I felt that given what I say I can do, and given that I'm a co-founder of a modality that specializes in the aura and all the kinds of, claims and/or direct experience that I have, I wanted to make something really transparent, really publicly available for people to see exactly my own process and what happens, so that there isn't just this, hey, guess what I can do, or I can do this, and you don't necessarily know the A to Z process by which it occurred. So lots of modalities in there, lots of study, vibrant, as you said, and I continue to be curious.
Yeah. And are you still progressing to see more and to sense more?
Yeah, there's always a progression for sure. Sometimes there are steps and sometimes there are leaps. So, the experience that I described to you, I would say was a leap, and there have been a handful of leaps, but in particular, that was the biggest single leap. But yeah, there's a refinement continually of my abilities, let's say, and certainly of my own personal healing. My own personal self-awareness always continues to go deeper and reveal the mysteriousness of myself to myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating, isn't it? The individual journey, and then more of the human journey and collective, consciousness, and all of us here together. I'm wondering if you could get into a little bit about the aura then. So what's your understanding of us as energy? Can you explain that for us?
Sure. I've been a teacher, the primary teacher in field dynamics in terms of our trainings for the last 5 years. I co-founded it with Christopher Armston, and I do a lot of the sciencey components of it. And I'm not a scientist. It's really important to say that. But what I am is a bit of a self-scientist, you might call it, and that's what I think meditators are and sages are from traditions, and that we study things very delicately and very intensely in the internal landscape. And there can be, in a sense, an object of knowing in those domains, different than external measurement, but internal measurement has its own validity. And this is one of those questions that I pose in the book: is what do we think has the right, in a sense, or is appropriate for truth seeking or truth bearing, and we're very heavily leaning in our contemporary world to the idea that only the external, only the mathematical, only the measurable things are real or true. But traditionally speaking and spiritually speaking, it's always been the opposite, in that the deepest truths can only be known directly through the known, through gnosis, through knowledge, as it's been called in different traditions. So the aura is something that has always been documented. It's obviously in every tradition in the whole world: north, south, east, west, indigenous, shamanic, Buddhist, yogic, Christian, Judaic, doesn't matter, right? It's everywhere, and it's because it exists. And so everybody should know they have an aura. And one of the things about my own direct experience is that I can say very confidently that you do. If anybody's listening to this, you do. You can think you don't, but I know you do, because I can literally see it. It's not a big deal. It's not a belief system required to understand that. But what it is and understanding what it implies is a much bigger thing. And it really opens us up, as you mentioned, I'm a part of field dynamics, and it's a training modality, or a modality to train people how to practice energy work in a very contemporary and broad way. And we do things where we're developing skill sets in people, but at the same time, the moment you start to study, when you actually study the nuts and bolts or the mechanisms of the aura, you immediately are dropped into deep philosophy. You're immediately dropped into the implications of what this means about who and what we are. So, for instance, we say energy healing. So healing is maybe something that a lot of people do, but the energy part is what distinguishes what we're doing versus some other modalities, right? So what is energy? All of the traditions that talk about energy, whether it be prana or chi, yogic or Taoist, are talking about what essentially we call now electromagnetic fields. And so electromagnetic fields are immaterial. They're not physical. And materialism, our current scientific paradigm, is purely materialist. That's what we live in. You know this. We're in the materialist paradigm. So there's this thing where we think of ourselves as material only because we've been told that. We've been, in a sense, indoctrinated into that. And all of the different institutions and academia and sciences in the world are led by the idea that really the only thing that's okay to be is material. But it turns out that you're also electromagnetic. Now, there is the discovery of things about bioelectricity and the importance of that, but that's really just the very surface. It's the very first, most superficial layers of seeing how electromagnetic fields interface the physical body. So the first thing to look at when trying to understand the aura is to say, you have a material body, but you also have an energy body. You have one body that you can see, and you have one body that generally you can't see. You have a physical body, you have a metaphysical body, and one is material and one's immaterial. And the immaterial body, your light body, as it's called in some traditions, does not behave like matter. It doesn't conform to the same predictability. It can't be measured in the same way. Certainly, science does not understand it at this point in its complexity, but we're starting to chip away at some of the mystery of it, particularly the idea that it actually has to do with a multidimensional system of reality rather than the three-dimensional system that we generally think of. And that's where we go from saying you have an electromagnetic field. That's what is comprised of your aura. It's about electromagnetic fields, which are immaterial. But if you start to get technical, immediately you go, well, it's not just any old electromagnetic field. It's a multidimensional, higher dimensional electromagnetic field. And that's where the technicality gets brought in and starts to get quite deeply philosophical beyond.
And so I need to ask, because I can hear the question coming. When you say multidimensional, what do you mean?
So multidimensional means that as opposed to the three dimensions of length, width, and height, which we say is the volume of space, there are actually other dimensions involved in our experience. And whether it be cutting edge physics, like things like, well, it's not cutting edge, but string theory has been around for a long time. And that posits a 10 and 11 dimensional model of reality. Or cutting edge neuroscience, like the Blue Brain Project, which explains that your brain's communication language is not in 3 dimensions. It's actually in higher dimensions, mostly up through 7 to 11 dimensions. The idea is that, and this is when I mention cutting edge neuroscience, I'm saying this in the sense that it is not a controversial thing. Your brain does not coordinate in length, width, and height. The language of the brain, the synaptic coordination, the firings of synapses in the brain do not suggest in any way that it's length, width, and height that's being worked with. It's higher dimensional geometric objects that coordinate the language of brain function, meaning your brain isn't talking in physical reality. Your brain's talking through higher dimensional coordination. Now, a way that I always do this with people to show it visually, and I like to, and please, it's an old joke, but it's a good joke. I'm going to break out the expensive field dynamics graphics machine right now. Okay. Now, for those who are listening to this, you'll be able to, who are watching this, you'll be able to see me do this. But if you're listening, you'll understand it well enough. I'll give you the play-by-play. I'm holding up a piece of paper. Okay. And there's a little stick figure on the piece of paper, right? Now, if I show you it from the sideways, you might say, Keith, that's 2-dimensional, it's flat. But if I curve it, it's 3D, right? So there I am. Okay. So there's a 3-dimensional me. And if that's me and I look around at the world, I say, this is all there is. Like the membrane of my perception being length, width, and height gives me the feedback impression that that's all I am. On my physical body, it's material, right? But what I don't know right, in a higher dimensional system is that actually I'm folded. As I fold the paper once, I fold the paper again, I fold the paper again, I fold the paper again. I'm enfolded, embedded, nested inside of a more complex, information-rich architecture that goes beyond what we see as physical. And that's where you go from physical reality, length, width, and height in space, into higher dimensions, which has to do with electromagnetic field interaction, in which everything we see as physical actually has, in a sense, an architectural lattice, right? Like an information network that embeds physical reality in a deeper electromagnetic information architecture that has to do with these things called higher dimensions.
Yeah, that's interesting. How does our physical, our biology, how does that biological system mesh or integrate with the multidimensional part of us? Where do they come together? What is that like?
So think of it as like information pathways. Okay, so think of energy as information at some very distilled level. And so the body is functioning off of different information, as is the field. It's just different types of information. And that information gets converted and it shifts form constantly, And so electromagnetically, the information is stored in a particular way. It moves through different dimensions, and then it starts to interface with the physical body in its form as it crosses over different dimensional thresholds, frequency thresholds, and also does certain kinds of fancy transformations to go from things like electromagnetic fields into physical level existence, if you will. So, we have things like biosignaling, cellular signaling, endocrine signaling, all these terminologies that come out of different bioelectric or biological functions in which the body is picking up on voltages, subtle voltage changes, picking up on subtle pressurization changes within its environment, things that we don't see or feel consciously in general, but the body's communication system is extremely turned on to very subtle signaling processes. And this underlies its kind of calibration and homeostasis functions. So when we talk about electromagnetic fields and then its interface with the body, on the one hand, it's information streaming, and on the other hand, it's talking about what is now kind of the emerging science of bioelectricity and cellular signaling and biosignaling and cutting-edge brain science, and all these different things kind of add up to show you that the body is not just sensing in the way that we tend to think it senses. It's not this kind of dull and kind of rigid machine-like kind of thing. It's extremely alive, and the amount of information it's interacting with is astonishing.
Right. Yeah. Totally agree with that. I mean, it's beyond any kind of supercomputer that we could even dream up. I mean, wow. So when we are not in balance, when we have illness, how does that show up in this structure that you've explained?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna take your question, which is excellent, and say, what's the one step we need to take to understand what the field is, right? And we can understand that by linking it to the question you mentioned, which is, how does imbalance energetically translate to physical imbalance, if I understand you correctly?
Right. Well, and also, is the dis-ease in the field observable by you? If you look at the aura, if you tune into that, can you distinguish where that is in the field? Is there a way for you to sense that or know that, or not?
Absolutely. This is certainly what all different kinds of healers and healing traditions do, is they teach you some kind of technique in order to identify blockage or imbalance. So you could take a blood test, and the doctor might use the sheet of the blood test. They might tap your knee. They might listen to your lungs. A body worker will feel your tissue and feel different joints and muscle sets and different fascial chains, etc. An energy healer is going to be focused on, how do I scan, track, and account for the energy field? So some people are using things like maybe pendulums. Some people, there's all kinds of stuff you could use out there. In general, with field dynamics, where we approach things is to really learn to sense through more classical ESP, subtle energy sensing, and picking up on how it is that one kind of interprets the energy of another, in a sense, to create a certain kind of, let's say, diagnostic, if you will. And we're not really in the scope of practice to diagnose people, but what we do need to do is get a sense of where is the system in this moment? Where is there flow? Where is there a lack of flow? So can you see these things or feel these things? Absolutely. It depends on your sensing, depends on what kind of natural talents or skills you feel the world through, which is individual to each person. But you can learn to decode the kinds of inner landscape sensing mechanisms that you have to understand how to interpret another person's system, or of course your own. So people have blocks. Everybody has a lot of energy blocks. It's really common. It's the human condition. And when we talk about blocks in the energy field, as opposed to blocks in the physical body, which we talk of as like things like inflammation, tissue dysregulation, organ dysregulation, immune dysregulation, different kinds of things going out of whack. The information systems in the body go out of whack and you get disease, right? So in the field, it's the information systems of the mind that go out of whack and create disease. So we call these psycho-emotional things. If you look at an energetic block, you're going to be looking at memory, emotion, belief, association, those things, objects of the mind as opposed to objects of the body. And as I mentioned before, information pathways, when you have everything is connected between your body and your field. Think of we have this physical domain, we have this electromagnetic domain. Think of them as being correlated one-to-one. The information in one domain 100% connects and reflects to the information in the other domain. So when you talk about an information exchange between body and mind, between electromagnetic and physical domains, when you disrupt the information on one end, you're disrupting the information flow to the other corresponding end. So in the mind, let's say in your energy field, in a particular dimensional set of connectedness, maybe there's a particular thought of I'm not good enough, and that I'm not good enough comes with a sadness, and that sadness comes with an insecurity. And there's emotion, there's belief, there's memory, and there's layers to that emotion, belief, memory set over time. And that builds up to create an area of blockage or a series of points that are a number of points of blockage. And that information streams to the correlated components of the body that are related to those different types of thoughts and emotions and body parts and tissues, etc. And it disrupts the functioning of the physical correlate. So that's the idea of working through blocks in general. And it's an open-ended system. You can have things happen physically that affect you mentally, psychologically, emotionally. And you can also have things conversely happen mentally, emotionally, that then affect you physically. It's an open-ended system. It's brilliant in that way.
Right. Now, I'd like to kind of dial back a little bit, because at the beginning you said everybody has an aura. Okay. And I think we can all agree on that. What else do we have in common? So we all have an aura, but what characteristics of the aura, to make it a little bit more simple? In general, what can we say about most people's auras?
Well, they're all fundamentally structured the same in that there's a universal kind of pattern. Just like the human being in general is going to have an axial skeleton and a brain and a heart and all those kinds of things, right? Mm-hmm. The aura has a particular kind of architecture that's universal, and that follows the classical 7 layers, 7 chakras, 7 dimensions, 7 frequency ranges, 7 colors of the rainbow kind of pattern. And that's exactly what it is. There are levels of resolution of the aura. There are different kinds of points of organization, but that master structure in which everyone has 7 kind of primary layers, like layers of an onion, and different frequency ranges that correspond to those layers, which are what the chakras are. They're geometries that represent different frequency ranges, which demarcate the different dimensions. Everybody has that kind of universal structure intact. And then how their form fills out, how their mind and body fill out that structure is what's unique to them. The other thing that's important to say when you say about what's the same is I think it's important for people to understand at the deep philosophical level that the aura is a way of actually understanding a map of mind and consciousness. And so when we go from the physical level, we see that we're most distinct, we're most different. So my body is my body and somebody else's body is their body. We're separate and distinct there. But as you go up the dimensions, you go up the layers of the aura, and you could say that the physical body is the lowest expression of your aura. You would say that your physical body is, in a certain sense, the frequency range of the lower 3 dimensions, the lower three chakras, is what we see as physical reality. And as you go up the different layers, things start to change and go from physical in terms of the information to non-physical, immaterial, and purely psychological at a certain point. And as you go up the different domains and frequency ranges, you get increasingly mental, but you also start to change in the nature of the identity at those different levels. And it goes from being differentiated and distinct and different to sameness and inclusivity. So as we go up levels of mind, as we increase the speed or the frequency range, if you will, we actually become more inclusive in our nature. So it has to do with identity. And I like to say it as simply like, I am Keith. Keith is the lower expression of my field, and that it's my physical body, and that's distinctly me, Keith. Then there's the upper layers of your aura, and that would be I. So when we go to the highest levels of the aura, we start to distill identity itself, and we get to a shared sense of I. And when you say, Andrea, I am Andrea, I would suggest that the I that you're saying and the I that I'm saying is actually the same. Sometimes this is called I am consciousness, a level of identity which can be universal in nature. And that's actually distinct within the aura, I. Then, as we go up through the crown and we start to leave the aura and actually leave the idea of formation itself, we go from that which is finite to infinite. We go from that which is horizontal to vertical through the crown. We actually leave I altogether as an experience and a knowing, and we actually merge with M. We get to M-ness and beingness. And beingness is where everything is completely homogeneous. The drop becomes the ocean kind of vibe. So that would be like an experience a person can have. And for people who, again, just reiterate this in a different way that I think is helpful for people, your aura is this expression of 7 colors. It's literally the same color as the rainbow. It's the same exact spectrum, red on the bottom, violet on the top. And in a sense, what awakening is and what mind and consciousness is showing us as the aura, as a reflective map of that, is that as we go from these lower levels and these separate levels, and we go back up the different color spectrum, the different levels of expression, right? We're returning to that white light, if you will. We're returning to that point of origin. And that's an experience. That's not like we can map it out. We can get intellectual. We can actually, in a certain sense, in the future, I think we'll be able to prove this in various ways on a more scientific level rather than on a more, you might say, subjective spiritual level. But the idea is that as you traverse these different planes of being, these different frequency ranges and dimensions, you're actually exploring the nature of the expression of identity and consciousness. And you're trying to, in a sense, and when we talk about awakening or enlightenment, you're essentially hoping you're moving towards the destination of that white light, that being the wholeness from which the white light goes through the prism and then expresses those 7 layers. And of course, it gets beyond the white light because that's just one kind of expression of wholeness. There's also the idea of negation or void or darkness or black, which is yet another, but I don't want to get too paradoxical.
Right. What is significant about the heart in all of this?
So the heart's really interesting. Paradox is a big word when we talk about these things, in the sense that the deepest things are at once both the most complicated and the most simple, right? It's like tell somebody, just love yourself. Just have world peace. It's like the things we all know are definitely the most important things on the list, but it's also the hardest thing to necessarily achieve or understand how to achieve or do. So the same is true for the most profound things regarding the structure of the aura, and the heart is one of those things. So if I draw attention to the structuring of the aura as a 7 system, number 7, we have 3 above, 3 below, and 1 in the middle, right? 3 above, 3 below, 1 in the middle. As I said earlier, the below is really, you can think of that as physical. The above is what we would call purely metaphysical, and that would be pure electromagnetic, and that's traditionally called the light body. That's where we have like sacred geometry as the organizing feature of that domain. That's what I see when I close my eyes. I see the geometric structuring of what underlies physical reality, and it's non-local. It doesn't have anything to do with space. And in the book that I wrote, I talk about, I'm pretty sure, or I think my suggestion is it has to do with time. It's not space, it's time. But it's geometry is what organizes everything up there. And that's what people, when they have plant medicine experiences, they get kind of ejected out of their body and they're going to all these sacred geometric domains. What's happening is they're just dissociating from the physical and having a very strong anchoring in the higher dimensions in the geometric, right? But that's present in everybody's experience in every moment. It's not something you don't go somewhere. It's just that you just usually don't see it.
Right.
In the middle, is as opposed to the light body, which is that kind of classical 7 colors, 7 dimensions, all sacred geometry, classical chakra iconography, all that stuff. That's a level of resolution of seeing from that perspective, from the light body, from the higher dimensions. When you go to the middle, you go to what's called the astral plane or the astral domain. The astral is very different. It's a paradox. Why is it a paradox? It's because it's in the middle. It's not above. It's not below. It's in the center. So when we talk about polarity, it's not positive, it's not negative, it's not above, it's not below, it's in the center. So it has certain qualities of centeredness. So a quality, for example, is that it's neutral. So when we talk about qualities of the heart is about neutrality. The heart is about unconditional love, right? So the expression of the heart means it's not good, it's not bad, it's just unconditional. So in that sense, the heart represents neutrality or unconditional love. It also, though, occupies or underlies what we call the astral plane. The astral plane is a kind of a transition zone between what's above and what's below, between purely electromagnetic geometric domains and physical domains, which are material and organic in nature. And the astral plane, in my opinion, is what is comprised of metaphysically and physically plasma. So we have this term in science called plasma. It's the most common matter in the universe. The astral plane to me is the plasmic domain, and it's the transition between what would be physical and metaphysical. And when you talk, when Barbara Brennan, very famous clairvoyant, talks about the astral plane, she describes it perfectly. She says, thoughts are things and things are thoughts. Right? And this is what lucid dreamers learn or astral projectors learn, that when you learn to project onto the astral plane, the moment you have a thought, it appears. Right? So thoughts are things and things are thoughts. There's this equilibrium, there's this middle point, this balance between body and mind, between thinking and manifesting. Right? So it's kind of a training ground, the astral, and it occupies this very interesting place between above and below. But here's the odd thing is, the astral, being green, being the heart, being the center, is a recapitulation of the idea of balance or equilibrium or neutral, because it's not the ultimate equal. The ultimate equal is a notch above it, and you might call it number 8 if you gave it a number, but it's not 8. It's really, in a sense, 0, or the origin point, in which the white light expresses through 7 levels. And when it reapproaches its own center, it goes back to the center, so to speak, right? So white light breaks into 7. Where is its recapitulation of middle? It's in the middle. It's 4. It's green, right? And if you look at different color theory, you see that green actually is one of the primary colors in additive color theory. So meaning red, blue, and green versus red, blue, yellow, I believe is the other one, right? So when it's green, it's showing you that green is a formative color, and the angle that actually creates green light is a 45-degree angle. Right, so we make a cross. So there's a line down, and then there's a cross in the middle. And of course, a cross is the closest thing to referencing the line. What's the most related angle to a line? Would be a 90-degree angle. So it's the green and unconditional love, neutrality, the astral plane, all of these things feed into the paradox that the heart is a plane that's expressing the idea of infinity or wholeness, but in a particular format that is not total wholeness, not total infinity, so to speak, but rather a lower kind of expression that is referential to it in its original form, that creates kind of a transition zone between body and mind, between the dimensional expressions. You said earlier, how does the information go from the different domains? The astral becomes this thing where you kind of have to pass through this layer, this densifying layer, which almost kind of plays out what is happening in body that as it sublimates into mind, and what's happening in mind as it sublimates, or rather descends down into body. And I know I'm talking a lot on this point, and I probably tongue twisting myself or pretzeling myself a lot. But the one thing that helps as well as a visual aid is a Mobius strip. So many people will be familiar with a Mobius strip. Do you know a Mobius strip? So a Mobius strip is where MC Escher, the artist, creates a lot of drawings that express the idea of a Mobius strip. It's where you take like a piece of paper and then you just twist the if you cut a long piece of paper, you twist the paper, you put it back together. And then if you run your eye over the paper, you see that your eye, right, the membrane inverts. It actually turns inside out as you run your eye over it. And it's like a trick of the eye, but that's exactly what the heart is. The heart is where there are these three membranes called length, width, and height of physical reality. And when we talk about kind of moving through different dimensions, as you go through the center, the plane has to turn inside out. Everything has to it's like a bag. You take your hands in a bag and you turn the bag, you pull it. And so the outside becomes the inside and the inside becomes the outside, if you follow me. So that's what the heart is it's the plane in which everything is turning inside out. It's inverting. And a Mobius strip shows how plane inversion happens. And this is why it's very complicated to measure the aura. It's because we don't know how to measure higher dimensions because of this plane inversion component, in my opinion. And it's also why we're, in a sense, quartered off from seeing these higher dimensions, is because our system is set up only to perceive these particular dimensions. Unless in general you do a lot of inner work or you have spontaneous projection experiences and you sort of open up these features within your energy system that maintain a certain perception of reality in a particular way.
What's the significance for us to visit the astral plane? When do we encounter the astral plane? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the astral is often known as the dreaming body. Mm-hmm. And this is where people experience dreams and when you have REM sleep and you're having dreams, the presumption is you're actually in your astral form. So I'm not, it's not my expertise. I have had plenty of spontaneous astral body projections. I also had a period of time after that initial Kundalini stuff that I described earlier, where I was just immersed in the astral plane for about a year and a half or so, where I was just seeing it all the time, because it's kind of just superimposed on physical. Again, it's this intermediary zone. And if you kind of slightly tune or tweak your perception, you actually can start to see the astral plane. Some people are able to do that somewhat easily. And there's a lot of stuff on the astral plane. There's a lot of things and beings and objects and activity. It has its own ecology. And in general, somebody like Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute really specialized in making this much more public and articulated it very well. But it's basically this other body, this astral body, which is coupled with the physical. And you can basically learn to peel it off, so to speak, or peel out of the physical and remain in the astral in a conscious state, and then traverse the astral plane consciously. So this is what lucid dreaming communities do. It's what astral projection communities do. And again, thoughts are things and things are thoughts on the astral. It's a party ground, playground of sorts. There's a lot happening there. Again, it's not my specialization. I don't have a lot of desire to spend time consciously on the astral plane and go traverse it and stuff. But think of it as a dreaming body is the best way to think of it.
Yeah. I think that is how a lot of people know it. Yeah. So how does the earth and the earth's energy play into our human experience with this field? So our energy bodies, our appearing physical body, but here we are on the planet and the earth has an energy. So how does that go together in your perspective?
Yeah, and you're making a good point that the Earth has its own field. And I think within the model I try and talk about is every single thing that you see physically has a corresponding field. And it's just a matter of what is the complexity of that field? What is the dynamic of that field? A living biological organism such as a human has an extremely complex corresponding field. But a planet also has a field. A rock also has a field. A berry has a field. A flower has a field. And that field reflects the informational component of the physical thing at what we might call a more psychological level. It's in a certain sense, we're talking about like the mental aspect versus the physical mind and body. So it's kind of, we have to really expand our concept of mind and body to consider what I'm saying. But the field of the planet is very alive. It's very interactive with us, so to speak. And we all are contributing to this planetary field. Like everybody is contributing equally to what is happening at a planetary level. And that's really important. You know, we have the idea in contemporary world of voting and the idea every vote counts. Well, I think that the most kind of equal contributive component of people's participation is at an energetic level in which everybody is truly equal. There's nobody who dictates. There's no territory. There's no citizenship. There's none of that stuff. Everybody's vibration, if you will, everyone's resonance, all of the information coming out of the psycho-emotional domains, which everyone is emitting consciously or unconsciously, is actually filling out and being shared with the greater environment. And that initial greater environment is the planet. And then beyond that, it's, of course, the solar system, the galaxy, et cetera, and all that stuff. So we have a very strong relationship to the planet. We are of this planet, obviously. There's plenty of cool science around what happens when, you know, humans have great stressful, traumatic collective world events, and the planetary vibration will shift. And that's been, you know, measured and stuff. The Princeton Anomaly Research Lab and things like that show that this is a measurable kind of thing, that blips in the collective human field will actually create blips in the planetary field. But yeah, there's a give and take with the planetary field. I don't know. You know, it's like we're stewards. I think that's an important word. We're stewards of the planet. We are the evolutionary organism that has the ability to maintain or destroy the planet. Right? If we make bad decisions, we will destroy the planet and ourselves. And if we make good decisions, we'll preserve it and make it as beautiful and bountiful as it can be. Which obviously it has that potential to be beyond abundant, beyond beautiful. We have all the resources we could ever possibly want here. And the only reason that we have a problem making use of those resources and having an extremely bountiful and plentiful kind of civilization is because we're not evolved enough to do it. You know. We function, we struggle with the ethical and heart-based kind of lessons we teach 7 and 8-year-olds when they're in first and second grade. And we say, hey, you guys have to share. You know, you guys have to play nice with one another. We don't play nice. We don't share. And we're generally more about territory and preserving certain groups over other groups. And that's kind of the level of ethics and consciousness that human beings are at. I don't mean to say we're not very evolved, but when you really take the macro scale of human evolution, I think that when we talk about what fundamentally is challenging for us, there are things that we would teach a 7, 8-year-old about being nice to other people that we don't have as a presumed common shared set that we do make as priorities in our interactions with one another. You know, and that, by the way, is very reflective in our chakra expression, you might say, and the heart, as you described earlier. I think that a way of understanding evolution is not through Darwinian biological evolution now, but rather I'm much more interested in the idea of evolution through the chakra system. So I think that you can see that the chakras represent levels of expression of different organisms. So the first chakra would be like more of a mineral level of expression, elemental. The second would be what we call plants and animals in general. And the third would be what we now see as humans and other advanced life forms on this planet, which potentially are also similar in some ways to us, maybe dolphins, maybe certain trees, who knows. But what we're essentially, in terms of our identity, is our identity kind of looks out of the lens of the third chakra. We essentially kind of go, who am I? It's like, oh, I'm this organism. I'm looking out of a window, and that's my third chakra. And the third chakra is about control. It's about kind of having a fight with other people. When you like push and pull with other people, it's all kind of coming out psychologically from a third chakra kind of give and take. And the whole point of evolving, in my opinion, both from what the organism will look like as we evolve, and also what our mode of consciousness, our kind of presumed rule sets of interaction and understanding, is just to simply go from grade 3 to grade 4. And grade 4 is the heart. So that's why so many traditions are just about the lessons of love, the lessons of forgiveness, lesson of compassion. It's just about opening your heart and not judging people. Like that's the primary thing, is to learn to not judge, because judgment keeps us separate, whereas compassion and forgiveness and acceptance brings us together. And so the lessons of just moving up into the heart, to me, are the primary things that we're being asked to do as a species, as a civilization, as a maturation, All this stuff with the higher chakras and enlightenment and awakening and light bodies and all that stuff. That's nice. It's great. But I don't think that that's actually what the human school is about, I would say. The human school is just going from 3 to 4, not 7, 8, 9,
Yeah.
transdimensional kind of stuff. It's just like open your heart, be kind, be compassionate, stop judging other people. Judgment is really the killer. Yeah.
It so is. Yes. Right and wrong. That's really been coming up a lot lately in my discussions with people and some of the work that I'm doing right now. And it's just it just keeps us stuck, doesn't it? So what do you see as where we're going? I mean, how do we get there? I mean, because we know we're all separated and, and not all of us, right? But there are a lot of people like us and like the audience here who are open to these things and that kind of thing, and they want to move in this direction. And then there are a lot of people still on the planet and they are just not going there right now. And so I don't know, what's your big picture on that? Where do you think, what's your crystal ball? How are we going to get out of this?
Who am I?
I know, we're just having fun. We're just pondering.
I'm happy to ponder, certainly. And just as a reference also to the last thing we were saying, that lesson of the heart, and I was talking about the numbers, 3 above, 3 below, 1 in the middle. The heart represents neutrality. That again is that quality that we have to develop, is not being in polarity, duality, right and wrong, male and female, night and day, good and bad, all this polarity. We have to learn to become neutral and non-judgmental. And that's the qualities of living from your heart. Is I experience things, I accept things how they are, I don't judge how they are, and I am compassionate to that which I judge, and I forgive that which I judge. These qualities. Compassion is the Eastern term, forgiveness is the Western term. They're really talking about the same thing. And when you practice forgiveness and when you practice compassion, if you see it from an energy field standpoint, and this just floored me as I was practicing and I had started having these abilities. When I would practice forgiveness, literally your heart just starts exploding open when you let go of the judgment of others. Because we often hold very deep kinds of judgment towards other people and things. And we say, that's wrong, and I know I'm right. And we hold this separation. And when you actually start to let that go and truly, sincerely, and authentically open your heart, your energy field literally just starts to explode open from the heart. And so much like light and vibrance comes out of your heart. It's one of the most beautiful things to see and to feel. And it's such a heavy load, a heavy burden at a soul level that's being offloaded when you do that for yourself. But it has to come from an authentic place, of course. The big picture is, number one, I accept whatever it's going to be. That's important. I want to put no expectation on what it should be. Maybe the evolutionary arc of this planet is to blow itself up. And if that were to be the case, I don't want to put any stress into not accepting that timeline or possibility. I'm open. It's whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. I'll do my part. And everybody hopefully wants to do their part. And I think that's the number one thing. What can we do is take responsibility for yourself and really clean your house up. We have a foundational kind of thing that we like to really, really espouse in field dynamics, and that is change out there starts with change in here. So it's really up to people to be responsible for themselves and to become clear within themselves in order to be able to understand themselves and thereby also interpret and understand what's out there. When we think we know things out there and we don't know things in here, we're just naturally going to be building those presumptions about what's out there based on distortion within ourselves. And that's not a really wise decision. So again, like you're saying, there's a lot of chaos right now. There's a lot of disorder. A lot of it is based on people thinking that they're really committed to knowing what's right in the world, that they really know and other people don't know. And they're right and other people are wrong. And this kind of orientation is very problematic. It's really problematic. What I'd ask those people to do is just consider, if you want to see the world be so peaceful, are you peaceful in yourself? What is it like? Can you really achieve commensurate peace within yourself that you want to see out there? And if you can, as a litmus test, that's a really good starting point to move forward within. When you know peace within in a whole sense or in a very developed sense, maybe then you understand how to facilitate peace out there, right? That would be a challenge to people. So inner work is number one. That's what I think. I think individual responsibility is number one. Number two is, what might facilitate that change is a good question. Is it going to be, if there was some kind of great evolutionary step towards peace and harmony and betterment and these things, if that were to be the case, will it come about because of philosophical movements? Will it come about because of scientific inquiry? I'm interested in AI, for example, and I had a whole chat going back 6 months ago with AI about all these different innovative, cutting edge understandings in physics about mind, body, higher dimensions, all these things. And I said, if you keep collating all this information and you're able to look at everything at the same time and have a kind of objective understanding of what's the most likely version of the true science, will it be in 5 or 10 years that you're going to basically be saying, like, by the way, everyone, materialism doesn't look correct at all? And will that be the same time when people start to actually trust the AI more than they trust the scientists, in a sense? I think that's really important for us to realize that we've already given our trust over to science. That's what's already happened in a non-intelligent way. The public, and what we do is we say truth is for scientists to figure out in general, the expert scientists. I really have a real hesitation with that as an absolute. But we have done that. We've outsourced truth to science. And what we've learned recently from the world events of the last 5 years is that can be very corrupted in an obvious way. So it's not a reliable source of truthfulness, nor is it a complete source of truthfulness. The other half of truthfulness to me comes from inside, subjective means, which I think we devalue very much and invalidate too much right now. So I think there's a chance that in the next 5 or 10 years, we're actually going to see that as we keep pouring more kind of truth seeking into technological means, and that has been birthed as what's known as AI now, is people are going to go, what does the AI say? It was what does Google say was 10 years ago. And 10 years from now, it'll be, what does the AI say? And the AI at some point very soon might go, by the way, the materialist paradigm that everybody thinks is true based on all the science I cross-correlate is very unlikely to be true. It looks like you're actually in a hyper-connected, higher dimensional, multidimensional, psycho-emotional, energetic matrix of reality that is extremely different than the materialist paradigm. And when that happens, maybe that changes all of the institutions over the course of 5 or 10 years. Maybe that starts to take people who would never look into spiritual traditions and the idea of interconnectedness beyond time and space in a serious way, and go, oh yeah, science is telling me that, AI is telling me that, that must be the paradigm. And when we do that, we automatically start to say, oh, my thoughts and my emotions matter even if I don't externalize them. This is the lesson of the energy field, is whatever you think and whatever you feel, emote, you are contributing to the collective. You're not only affecting yourself, you're affecting your partner, your family, your neighbor, your community, your country, your state, the planet, because it all feeds into the same information system equally. So there's something important to that. And that means responsibility. Again, it turns it back to, I have to be responsible for my thoughts and my emotions. What? I thought that if I think horrible things about somebody and if I am filled with hatred all day, but I don't treat people poorly and I don't seem like I'm an angry person, that I'm not acting it out. Well, on some level, yes. You haven't fully acted it out physically, but you're still holding and circulating all of those, in a sense, negative energies, right? And you are sharing that, whether other people are conscious of it or not. You're filtering that into the collective as well, whether you're conscious of it or not. And so self-responsibility and self-awareness starts to negate or neutralize these kinds of unskillful ways of being that are very unpleasant. Nobody really wants to experience those things. But nonetheless, we don't generally have a skill set to work with them, So maybe science does it. right? That's a possibility, which is an interesting thing. And then the other part that I would add simply is maybe there's something of like the marginal group of people who are very interested in inner work and spirituality and raising the vibration. Maybe there's something of a kind of a collective frequency law, if you will. Some people talk about this, where when you take different kinds of substrates scientifically, chemical substrates, and you introduce 1% coherency to the substrate, meaning there's a lot of like negative bonding, and then you add one kind of element, one chemical that changes the bond because it's coherent. It's actually organized much more. It's much more together. What it does is it flips the bonding propensity of every other kind of chemical relationship. And so is there a mimicking on an energetic level where if 1% of the population of humans were to be in a very coherent state together, meaning very loving, very open, very neutral, very positive, right? At the same time, at the same moment, could that somehow create some kind of a shockwave at an energetic level that somehow flips what's going on here, kind of just shifts it into some different domain? This is an interesting kind of thing. This is where mass meditation comes in and the effects of mass meditation. And again, the idea of some kind of mass shift based on like the 1%. And that would be about, I think, what is that, about 450 million people right now or something?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm not
I don't
sure.
have I can't do math when I do this. Yeah. And that is an interesting kind of idea, to ponder. And I've heard that before. And yeah, and the cool thing to me is to imagine that happening. And it wouldn't be like all the other people were taken over or anything. It would be, I imagine it would just kind of be like a filter lifting, a filter or a blinders on that they've had, and they just are removed. And then without that, they start to perceive things differently. Perhaps it's something like that, because we can't like hit people over the head with our shockwave of love and have it just, change them, because, they have their own free will and everything. But one other thing that you said, it got my attention. And that was this idea that when people have all those thoughts and they're holding the grudge and they're being really critical of other people, but yet they're not acting on it. That stood out to me, because I think that some of us might feel that way, and then we give ourselves a trophy because we're not acting on it. So we have this false sense of Good Samaritan thing or something. It's like, oh yeah, I can't stand you, but I'm wearing a smile and, putting on this show. And isn't that a gift? Because I'm such a good person or whatever. And certainly there are people operating like that. But do you know, I think that could be a flip for people. If they realize that one thing, that's an illusion, and they really are broadcasting that, and they're not actually doing something that's noteworthy and positive like they thought they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's now this, I'm going to go kind of rogue here. It's because I have to say what came to my mind. And it's kind of like if we're all in a pool, like we're all in a swimming pool, and they think that they have had the best manners in the pool and, whatever. And then all of a sudden they realize one day they've been peeing in the pool all along, but yet they didn't know it. I mean, that could be change worthy. If they can see their own behavior through a new lens. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. Everybody is where they are. Right. Mm-hmm. And so no judgment to that. There's this moment, and this is the moment that things can change. And this is the moment we're responsible for, because it's the only domain and point of interaction that we have any volition. So you just need to work with where you are right now, and to say, how am I moving towards the expression of myself from now and into the future? And what am I doing about that? And that takes action. It takes choice. It takes will. It takes trust. And if you want to be a quote unquote better person, right, it means that there's work involved with that. Inner work is arguably the hardest thing to do. It's arguably the hardest thing. We think that external accomplishment is the hardest thing to do often because that's all we see as accomplishment in general in our society. Here's a trophy, here's $1 billion, here's a prize, here's an accolade, here's a position, here's a job, here's what you can show other people externally. And yes, of course, that is challenging. There are certain achievements that are extremely challenging and deserve massive amounts of accolade. But the thing that everybody can do equally and everybody has access to equally is their inner work and who they choose to be as a person on the inside. And again, the inside to me translates as to what you are on the outside. So inner work can be very challenging, but requires choice and requires effort, real effort, dedication, real dedication. So maybe it starts with buffering how you externalize the action, like you said. Maybe that's where it's at. Maybe it's like maybe a person has a lot of anger issues, and for them, the best they can do is to not actually seem angry externally to people. Don't get loud, don't yell, don't be heated, even though they're bubbling inside. And if they can do that enough and be self-reflective, maybe they start to then notice, oh, wow, there is all this anger inside of me. And as opposed to I have that outside version in check, now can I start to quell and get in touch with the inside anger? Where is that? What emotions are there? What unresolved issues are within me that I haven't really looked at? That relationship with my father, that sense of loss, that grief that I haven't processed, whatever it might be, that is having all that anger come up in them. And slowly, they chip away at the structures that are underlying all of the chain link of that anger. Remember, information, right? It's information in different domains and it streams through different levels of expression. So healing, holistic healing, is about getting to the root of those issues. So you have to, in a sense, like follow the breadcrumbs and process layer by layer each of the components of what is the expression of what we call an issue, whether that be an anger issue or a physical disease, potentially. Sometimes physical disease is the expression of something psycho-emotionally not processed, something stress-induced. So can you follow back from that physical disease point through your body, all the signaling of the body telling you, hey, take a look at something, and start to trace that back to its origin and try and resolve those things, to try and let go of those things. It's not necessarily an easy thing. I made one quick note I want to mention, positive versus neutral. Like the language of positive, negative is yet another version of polarized language. And I just want to put an asterisk on there and say, if you have the choice between positive and negative, the tendency is, of course, to move towards positivity, and that makes sense, but also to keep in mind the neutral. And the neutral is really the transcendence between those two. For listeners, because I'm talking a lot about neutrality, and then you can go, oh, there's positive and negative, and there's these people and those people. It's really important to say neutrality is a transcendent feature of these things, which is always present within the polarity. So neutral is what we try and find as a root. Neutral is what we try and find as a home base. So if you can live from neutrality as your anchor or your primary place of operation and perception and identity and all those things, and partake in the polarized reality which we naturally live in through positive and negative decisions or energies, so be it. But if you don't have that neutrality, you're necessarily only in the positive negative duality. So this is what we do in field dynamics, and this is like a big thing that we can see reiterated in the structure of the energy field, for example. Your central channel is the iteration of neutral in your system, meaning when you're in your center, when you're in the central axis of your field and your body, you have access to being neutral in a way that's different if you're just in your arms, if you're just in your legs, right? So when you go to the center of your field, you're learning to sit in the center of your system, which is in and of itself neutral. Also, your heart is the other, that 90-degree angle across the vertical axis. That's also the neutral. It's like the bullseye. So sitting center, heart, right? When you start to position yourself in those places, which by the way, are not available unless you cultivate that. We're talking about issues of anger or grief. Those things block our ability to be in our center. So when you start to look within yourself and you start to notice, where am I blocked? the periphery is where things get blocked, and we get identified in the peripheral aspects of what we are. But the journey is to come home into one center, into a transcendent neutral. And that's the kind of healing journey that we try and help people, to experience in the work we do at Field Dynamics, and also just a little tidbit on how issues express versus energy anatomy.
Yes. Wow. So many different ways to unravel all of this, and little threads to follow, and more questions. But for people to find out more about you, Keith, what's the best way that they can do that?
So our site is called energyfielddynamics.com. Obviously, that means the dynamics of the energy field. So it's Energy Field Dynamics. Christabel and I also offer private sessions to people. We do a lot of one-on-one work with individuals that also can be found on the site. We do yearly retreats. And we also have a podcast. And last thing I'll mention is, if anybody wanted to check out the book that I published this year as well, it's called Radical Reality. It's available on Amazon, also through the website. You can find it, and you can hear about my story and a more formalized version of some of the more kind of spiritual, scientific kinds of things I try to express here on the podcast with you.
Yes. So much to reflect on and explore. Thank you so much again for being here, Keith. And we'll put the link also down to your website. We'll do all that in the show notes for everybody, and in the video description on YouTube, so they can reach out.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for tuning in. Keep trusting your truth. Keep listening to your inner wisdom, and keep following what resonates. To sign up for the newsletter, leave a review, or connect, visit whatresonatspodcast.com. You'll also find everything linked in the show notes.